All right, guys, welcome back to Hanging with Hastings, and this is going to be a really, really special show today. I'm joined by Tom Joyce here again, my partner in crime. Tom, I did a really quick review of the game against the Jets yesterday, just so we could get that over with, so me and you could talk about what we're going to talk about today. And today, we are paying tribute to Highmark Stadium, Rich Stadium, the Ralph, and all of our memories, not just football, but other events that happened there. And we're going to talk about what that stadium meant to us since 1973. Me and you now think about it when that stadium opened, 1973 September. We were just entering fourth grade.
Right.
Yep. So we were 9 years old.
Yep.
But I was there against the New York Jets. So Tom, before we begin, I'm going to give you some trivia right here. See if you know this. Now, a lot of people may not know this, but started the 1973 season, the Bills were on the road. OJ ran for 250 yards in an opener against New England, and then we lost to the San Diego Chargers, who were helmed at quarterback by Johnny Unitas, his one season with the Chargers. And we lost that game. So we come into the home opener against the New York Jets, and we win 9-7. So the following week, we play Roman Gabriel and the Philadelphia Eagles. And it was an amazing game that the Bills win because Tom Dempsey, if you remember, I think Tom Dempsey ended up playing for us at one point. He was the guy, the kicker, who only had half a foot. And at the time, he had the NFL record for the 63-yard field goal. He missed like a 25-yard field goal at the end of the Eagles-Bills game, and the Bills win. But my trivia question to you is, who scored the first regular season touchdown for the Buffalo Bills in that stadium?
I remember that it was a kickoff return.
It was Wallace Francis, 101-yard kickoff return. Some people get confused because the Redskins played the Bills in the preseason opener, and there was a kickoff return was the first play of that game. Right. But that wasn't for the Bills, and that wasn't the regular season. It doesn't count. The first touchdown scored by Buffalo Bill was Wallace Francis, 101-yard kickoff return. And also what I thought was kind of cool is the last two games in the stadium were the Eagles and the Jets. The first two games that are in that stadium regular season were the Jets and the Eagles. So it kind of what comes around goes around. It all went full circle. Tommy, give me some of your your first memories of that stadium.
My first memories were in the Joe Ferguson years, and Joe, I think, is sometimes maligned. He could be a really good quarterback. I saw a game in the early 80s. He engineered a great last-minute comeback against the Raiders. Really exciting game to be at. Kind of lean years for the team. But I think that, Joe could be an exciting quarterback, and with the good team around him, he was capable of some big wins. He wasn't consistent in the way I think that people would like him to be, but I was at some great games in those years with Joe, and it was exciting to watch because, again, when he was on, he could really get it done.
Yeah, a lot of people don't remember that there weren't there's more teams can make it into the playoffs now than back in those days.
Right.
And there were seasons like the 1973 season where the Bills had a winning record. I believe they were 9-5 and they didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
But that 73 and Joe Ferguson, he was my first quarterback, really. He was the guy that I remember when we got Jim Kelly, and I was mad because, what do you mean he's going to wear 12?
Yeah.
That's Joe's number, that's Fergie's number. But Fergie played for us from 1973 to 1984, and we did make the playoffs 3 times with Fergie. In 1974, where we lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then in 80 and 81, where the famous game against the Chargers, where Fergie played with a broken leg, and we lost to the Chargers. Those the 80 and 81 teams, they had like one of the best defenses in the league. And remember we had Isaiah Robertson and Jim Haslett and Smurlus and Shane Nelson.
Yep.
And it was really a great, and Villapiano from the Raiders we got over there, and it was a nasty team. I believe Conrad Dolber was on that team as well for the offensive line.
Leg whipping everybody.
Oh man, it was a different game back then. But the 1970s, yeah, it wasn't the most prosperous year, but they had some of the most exciting moments, and it really comes down to OJ, and it's a terrible tragedy what happened in his later life. What would become of OJ, and of course killing his wife and everything. Just a tragedy, and part of that Buffalo curse, sports curse, I think, But in the 1970s, there was just nothing like seeing him. That almost defined my childhood, watching, being at all those. You watch those NFL films, and I was at pretty much every home game that you see him with the blue jersey on. I was at that game, and it was like watching poetry run.
Right.
He was incredible. And in 1973, the opening year of the stadium, that was the 2003 year. And so many great memories. I can remember a Monday night game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I wasn't allowed to go to that game because, as I said, we were only in fourth grade. I was 9 years old. And back in those days, Monday night games started at 9 o'clock. Yeah. And I was lucky if I got to see Howard Cosell's halftime highlights before I had to go to bed. Yeah. Let alone go to the game. So I didn't go to that game against Kansas City Chiefs, but OJ rushed and got to 1,000 yards, and that was week 7. And that was the first talk that maybe, just maybe, he could hit the 2,000.
In 14 games.
Which 14
games.
Is
still not been run.
It's never been done. No. I don't believe people have surpassed the 2,000 mark, but I don't believe that anyone's done it in 14 games. So it was just an incredible journey to watch him do that, and he did not get the record. He broke the 2,000 in Shea Stadium against the New York Jets in the last game of the year, where they carry him off the field, and Rick Azar gives the famous quote of, "I don't think any of us realize what a pleasure it's been to watch OJ run for 2,000 yards." Classic moment, classic coach that we had in the early 70s with Lou Saban.
Yep.
You remember he coached us in the 60s and got us our 2 world championships in the AFL. And they brought him back, and I don't know if you know this, Tommy. OJ wanted out of Buffalo. When they brought Lou Saban back in '72, he said, "If you stay, I think you're going to enjoy yourself," because it was Lou Saban that said, "We're going to feature OJ." Believe it or not, the Bills get Simpson. The first 3 years of his career, he was like a kickoff returner, and they said he was a decoy. So Saban's the guy that put him on that track to become the Hall of Famer that he was, and all those great moments that we witnessed were because of Lou Saban.
He was a really old school style coach. You can still picture him, prowling up and down the sideline. He belonged to that group of men, with the Tom Landrys at the time, and over in Minnesota, Bud Grant. And those guys were, they were raised in old school football, and what they coached was hard-nosed, between the tackles game, and I think the Bills are lucky to have him. Did he achieve great success? No, but he was a good coach.
I think he could have got us somewhere, and him and Ralph Wilson didn't get along.
He was well respected by the players.
Yeah, no, I think because of his relationship, and if you remember, I think that it took a while to get Lou's name on the Wall of Fame because Ralph and Lou did not get along very well. I think, and that also happened with Bill Polian. So Ralph had a way of getting, if he would have been a little more hands off, I believe, who knows what could have happened with not only Lou Saban, but what more could have Bill Polian done with the team that he had built up in the 80s and 90s. But one more game I want to just really quickly talk about in the 1970s before we move on was I remember the home opener in the 1974 season was another Monday night game that I was allowed to go to. And that was a game against the Raiders, and back and forth game, and Joe Ferguson leads the team down to a last-second touchdown that he throws to Ahmad Rashad, and I can still see it if I close my eyes today. An amazing moment. My dad made me promise that if he let me go to that game, that I had to get up in the morning to go to school. And I actually went to that game with my cousin John Falling, who is passed on since. And we're going to talk about family also in a little bit. But what a great game, and what a great experience Johnny and I had at that game with my dad. And that 74 season was the only season that OJ went to the playoffs, and then we lost to the Steelers, and Terry Bradshaw's Steelers began their Super Bowl run in their dynasty. Right. So that was great. There's so many. I remember a game against the Patriots also where Fergie threw up a last-second Hail Mary for the touchdown win. Rolling hooks. I remember having some really good games in there. It was a fun team. So some of the great names from those teams, like Bobby Chandler, J.D. Hill, Ahmad Rashad, the Electric Company. You can't talk about the 70s without Reggie McKenzie and Joe DeLamielleure and Paul Seymour at tight end. And it was just, and of course, Donnie Green always holding Donnie Green. But it really was a great offense. And what my memory of those OJ teams basically were, we scored a lot of points and we were a good team, but our defense wasn't the best back in those days. Yeah. And do you remember there was a sticker, the Bills are due in 72. Yeah, I remember and that. We got Walt Patulski and Mike Kadish, and they were on the Bills defense for all the 70s, and that they were mainstays on those teams.
The Bills are doing 72. I remember that well.
Yeah,
Walt Patulski. Right now,
from Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the younger viewers are furiously.
They're like, "Who are you talking about?"
Names,
right?
But and they were household names at the time.
They were.
And, at that time, the Bills, to be honest, were also competing with some really good Sabres teams in the mid-70s.
The French Connection.
And
the Buffalo Braves.
There was a lot of Braves who went to the finals, and it was a lot of fun to be a Buffalo sports fan in those mid-70s years. And the Sabres unfortunately came up short, but they had some great years. It went to French Connection. And the Braves were one of the best teams in the league.
We just couldn't get past the Celtics.
They couldn't get past the Celtics, and they had the league MVP in McAdoo. So again, there was a lot of going on in the sports scene in Buffalo during that time.
We'll wrap up the 70s by just saying, and I try to explain to some of the younger guys that sit behind me, I was trying to explain a little of this to me, felt very old yesterday. As I said, they were showing highlights, of the great plays in the stadium. And I go, there's the 51-3 game in 1990 going to our first Super Bowl. And the kid behind me goes, I wasn't born yet. And I looked at him, I'm like, what? And I was born in 92, and I felt really, really, really old, which, gosh, it's almost unfathomable to think that these guys don't remember or weren't born for those. There's so many people. It's been that long. Time goes quick. But it was just, for those people, what I was trying to tell them about the 1970s, you had the Bills, you had the Sabres, like you said, the French Connection, Gilles Perreault, Rick Martin, and Rene Robert. And then you have people like Don Luce and just Crozier in goal. Again, but great team. Again, that couldn't get past. I believe it was Boston Bruins and the Philadelphia Flyers. And that Bobby Clark and the what do they call them? The
Broad Street Bullies.
Broad Street Bullies, right? Couldn't get past them. And McAdoo was the best player in the NBA. And it was a different time also, as my dad had season tickets to the Bills, had season tickets to the Braves, had tickets where we went to half of the Sabres games. So it was a different time you could afford it. My dad wasn't rich. He was a blue-collar guy.
Yeah.
But it was a different time where before the corporate sponsorships and the players didn't make that much money. Like Joe DeLamielleure I believe he was a security guard in a bank in the off-season. And that they didn't make the money that they make now. Or, it's amazing. I was in my elevator coming down here, and I just read something about a baseball player that just signed some like $500 million contract. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But in the 70s, it was a man's game. It was some pretty rough football, some pretty rough. The hockey guys didn't wear a helmet.
Quarterbacks took rough hits then.
And it was a tough game. But we're going to move on to the 1980s real quick with the Buffalo Bills. We suffered through 2-14 seasons back to back in 84 and 85. That gives us Bruce Smith and that gives us Andre Reed. And if you remember, Jim Kelly was drafted after 83. He was part of that and he did not want to be
no.
here. He went to the USFL.
He left the Houston Gamblers in the USFL and said, "I'm not playing in Buffalo."
Right, and he says now, watching an interview, that going down the tunnel in '86 when he made his debut, he said he realized now my mom and dad will never have to worry about money ever again, and he felt the electricity and he fell in love with Buffalo. It took him coming here, and there is a famous quote. Bum Phillips coached here for the Buffalo Bills before he went on to Houston, and the quote was that this happiest day of my life and the saddest day of my life, or what it was, his wife said, the two saddest days of her life were when he said that we have to go to Buffalo to coach, and then the second saddest day in his life was when they said they have to leave Buffalo, because once they got here and saw the spirit and the energy that these fans, the mafia, and the city, how they embrace this team, it's just infectious. I mentioned that in the video I made last night. Once you become a Bills fan, once it's in your blood, it's in your blood. Even if you move out of state,
Right.
you're forever a Bills fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the 80s, we get Jim Kelly in 86, 87. The team, you can see it growing. And I remember 87 season getting a quick trade with the Colts, I believe it was, and I believe it involved Eric Dickerson, to going to the Colts from the Rams, and Buffalo somehow got Cornelius Bennett.
Biscuits. Yeah, and that was really solidified what would go on to become a great defense.
Right. I remember a game in 87 against Denver, and we didn't make the playoffs in 87, but we beat Denver, who was a really good team, that Super Bowl team that year. And it was really where you said and I was at that game, something is starting to happen with the Bills. And then we get to 1988, Tommy, and that's where the Bills blossom. Thurman Thomas is a rookie. Between him and Rob Riddick were the running back tandem in '88. The Bills are just not a lot of people remember this. In '88, one of our biggest MVPs of the team was Scott Norwood.
Right.
We were winning games sometimes 9-6, or 12-9 in here or whatever, and he was kicking game-winning field goal after game-winning field goal in '88. And yes, the offense was progressing. But man, Norwood, who would have thought, I still feel bad for the guy to this day, because as we'll get to what happens with Norwood in a minute. But let's talk about the first playoff game in 1988 against the Houston Oilers. Tommy, what's your memory?
I think that, that game was afterwards, beforehand, it was the first night in Buffalo. And the ball dropped. The next morning was the first playoff game at the stadium. It was cold. I was there. It was exciting. It was, as you mentioned, it was loud.
Oh.
And the Bills came out, and just a pent-up anticipation for a playoff game. The stadium was sitting there for 16 years without hosting a playoff game, and finally it was there, and it was just this collective explosion of happiness. It was really a special game to be at, and I remember, just soaking it all in along with everybody else there. As I said, the first night downtown ball drop was the night before. We were at that. The whole crowd was chanting, let's go Buffalo at the ball drop, and then we headed right from the ball drop down to the stadium, because you do this sort of
That's
thing.
That's the way you do it when you're young.
When you're 24,
right?
And we watched that game, and it was a really special game to be at.
I was there with my dad, and the two of us. I can remember going to breakfast. I had a different experience than you. I was sober, but I remember going to breakfast with my dad before the game, and then you got to remember, I've been going to games since, like I said, '72, the last year of the Rock Pile. I don't remember up until that time. Now, I'd say the new fans in the Josh era are super loud, where it almost hurts your ears when you're in that stadium. But up until that moment, from '72 up until '88 there, I don't think I ever heard that stadium be that loud. I remember they were giving away pom-poms for us to shake, right. And it was just the most electric experience. And Jim Kelly and Thurman had a big a big day, and we win, and it was just an incredible experience. We go on to lose to Cincinnati in the AFC Championship that year, but there was this feeling like we're right on the cusp, and we felt like, the AFC was losing Super Bowls, and we felt like we could be the strongest and the best team to come out of the AFC maybe ever since Pittsburgh, in the 70s. 1989 happens, the Bickering Bills, where we go 9-7. We still win the division. Everyone in the division had a rough year. New England was a really poor team, and so were the Jets. And Miami struggled that year as well. So 9-7 wins us the division, but we were known as the Bickering Bills. And I remember Bill Polian coming on TV saying, Marv Levy's still the head coach. I'm still the GM, and if you don't like it, get out of town. And Thurman called out, when he was on. They had I think it was who was that? It was Paul McGuire that had the what was the cable? Do you remember the international or not? Our cable network that had the Buffalo Bill Roundup.
Oh yeah,
and I believe Paul McGuire was the
Philadelphia.
Maybe I can't remember, but I can't remember. We're 61.
Yeah.
But I remember him Thurman being on with Daryl Talley, and they said, "What's the problem?" And Thurman says, "Quarterback," because Kelly had been calling out other players, and Thurman said he just wanted to see how it would feel for him to be turned around. Jim was a cocky guy, and we know him now. We all love him. He seems like a part of the family. But when he initially came, like I said, he didn't want to be here at first.
He wouldn't sign autographs?
He didn't. He was tough. I knew him in a different light because I worked for my brother at South Shore Golf, and I used to caddy for a lot of those teams in the late 80s, early 90s. And I caddied for Jim Kelly. And when you were at the golf course, he would shut down the bar afterwards and pay for everybody. Your money was no good. Now, there are a couple other players on the team, I won't mention their name, that were not very friendly to the help and stuff, that expected you to buy them a beer. Here they're multimillionaires, and we have to buy them the beer. So Kelly, for all the arrogance and that, and remember, Kelly also was Elvis in a small town. Right. He was the kingpin here, and he took very good care of us at the golf course. So I'll give him that. But that 89 season was I think the maturity of the team, where they went through this rough patch where there's all this talent. Yeah, Bruce Smith, one of the greatest defensive players of all time. And it's an amazing, if Marv Levy's in the Hall of Fame for one reason at all, it's that he was able to keep that team together.
Right, yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to say that there was a team of a lot of big egos, and I think that Smith had an ego, and Thurman had an ego, and as mentioned, Jim Kelly had an ego, and I think that there was some difficulty with them putting aside their own egos and ambitions, and I think they had to work through that. But they did, and the proof of that was in the '90s season.
Well, before we go on to the 1990s in the Buffalo Bills, I want to change subject matters for a couple minutes. I want to talk about some other events that happened at the stadium, and I'm going to talk about some of the great concerts that we were able to see there. And my first experience at the stadium, my very first concert was in 1976, and it was Elton John with Boz Scaggs opening up. Don't Go Break My Heart was the number one song in the country at the time. The Bicentennial was going along, and Kiki D was at that show as well. Not only singing Don't Go Break My Heart, but then she also sang I Got the Music in Me. I believe at the time she was dating Elton's guitar player, Davy Johnstone. So my first concert, I can remember it like I can close my eyes and I'm there. I mean, here I am, 12 years old, and it was my birthday present. And Boz Scaggs performs in front of this curtain that says, "Louder than a Concorde, but not quite as pretty." And he's doing his songs. I believe he had Low Down and stuff. Was
Lido Shuffle.
Lido, I believe that was going on back at that time. Right. So that was a fun concert. So then there's a little intermission, and all of a sudden I hear this song starting up called Grow Some Funk of Your Own, which was off of Elton's Rock of the Westies album. And I'm like, where's Elton? Where is he? I can hear the music. All of a sudden, the curtain opens up, and Elton's standing on the piano, doing his best Mick Jagger strut. Jumps off the piano, starts rocking it like a 15-minute version of the song. He played all my favorites that day: Rocket Man, Benny and the Jets, Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding, Saturday Night's Right for Fighting. I was just in heaven, and it really, for me, was the moment that I said, I have to be in music. I have to do this. I want to be a musician, and it's all because of that day, way back in 1976. Tommy, give me your first.
My first concert was 1981. The Rolling Stones.
I was there too. I was there.
They just tore the place down. It was George Thorogood in Journey. George Thorogood had a great opening set. He was new at the time.
Right.
Who's this guy? George Thorogood, Delaware Destroyers. Great rock roll. Journey came out, and if you remember what happened with them,
they got booed.
They got booed. They only played a minimal amount of songs.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good mix.
Fit. It was like when Tom Petty opened up for Kiss or something.
Yeah, and afterwards, they got on the radio and said they'd never come back to Buffalo, which of course they did. But it was unfortunate they were stuck in that spot, because it didn't work out for them. Then the Stones came out. If you remember, the weather turned bad. The Stones absolutely tore it up.
Under my thumb.
Under my thumb, and it was just a great show. Then the next year was the Who, and the Who
82.
came out,
and that was supposed to be their final tour.
Right, and that was David Johansen, New York Dolls, and the Clash opened for the Who.
David Johansen just passed away too.
He did, and I think what most people who remember at that concert was when it was a hot day, and they went into "Love Rain on Me" from Quadrophenia.
Yes,
and of course on cue, the sky opened up and the rain came down. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a magical. I remember that, and then I don't know if it was the next night, but they went to Toronto to play the final show of that tour, and that's on video. That was released on video, and it was pretty much almost the same show in that. So if you ever want to get a memory of that show, look that up. I'm sure it's on YouTube. The Who also came back in '89 and did Tommy,
right.
And I was at that concert as well. Great concert. Great choices. And the Rolling Stone one you talked about, that was Tattoo You. Yeah. And I take that back. I was not at that concert. My folks wouldn't allow me to go to that concert. We were
probably a good choice.
Were we in 11th grade then or so? And
yes.
And
it was the summer going into our senior year.
Yeah, I was not allowed to go to that concert. No matter how much I begged, I was very angry.
Yeah.
And I kind of remember me and you. You're right. During we were in the senior lounge, and you kind of mocking me for like teasing me because you went there and I didn't go. Yeah. But so I'm sure that was a great memory. Another great thing in 1986, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and the True Confessions tour, and along with the Grateful Dead. My bass player at the time, Ray Larigo, was worked backstage, and he told me that after that show, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, and Tom Petty had to be airlifted out. Like they had passed out, they were zonked and they were done, and had to be airlifted out on stretchers.
Yeah.
And that, but that show was also simulcast via satellite to Farm Aid '86. I remember that, and it was really cool for the stadium to get another national recognition with Bob Dylan and the Dead and Petty. A great concert, and that concert's on YouTube if you want to check it out. The Dylan and Petty portion at least are.
And then the Grateful Dead played 5 really memorable shows at the stadium: 89, 90, 92, and 93. It also at the 86 show. Those were really great shows, well remembered by Dead fans. In the late 80s, Dead was going through a renaissance. Jerry had cleaned up his act from a few years earlier.
Touch of Grey.
They had big success with Touch of Grey. They were at the most successful commercial period in those concerts in the late 80s are really fondly remembered by Dead fans. Those were all great shows. I have to say, the 89 July 4th Dead concert, which was later released as a CD and a video.
Is that the one trucking off to Buffalo?
Yeah.
I own that because that's if you have Amazon Prime Video, you can buy it off of there for like $10.
That was a really memorable show. As someone who saw, over the years, a lot of Dead shows, a lot of us point to that show as one of the most memorable shows of the Dead's touring at that time. Just a great spirit. They came out July 4th, and it was just a really memorable, great show. In one of the best concerts I've ever been a part of, and it's finally remembered by all.
Well, in 1982, there was another concert. Now, my band started in 1981, and in 1981 through the summer of '82, we played mainly high school dances and private high school parties and stuff like that. We didn't play bars because we were still young. In 1982, there was a Summerfest at the stadium with it was Ted Nugent, Iron Maiden, Loverboy, and Foreigner headlining, and it was a huge concert, a huge event. I remember Nugent's speaker blowing out, and I remember him saying, "Oh my God, like the best women are here in Buffalo," and I said, "Well, they're in Cleveland tomorrow." All the best, that old routine. But I was not impressed with Foreigner. I thought Lou Graham's voice didn't sound very much like the record, but I remember Loverboy sounding amazing, sounding just like the record, and me thinking at the time, "Oh, this is going to be a huge band." They were just I think by '85 done, right?
Yeah.
But that was a real fun concert, and that night after that concert, now again you wonder, I didn't do drugs, and somehow I stayed up all night the night before because I was excited about the concert, and we played our first bar that evening, which was McVan's on Niagara Street, which is now a 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
But I remember being at McVan's and they had a dressing room and seeing pictures on the wall of Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison and that they had played there in the 60s. And thinking, "Oh my God, we've made the big time," and we come on stage and there's 25 people there, and we're just little teeny boppers. And but that concert, we stayed up all night, went to that concert, and then played our first bar that night.
But today there's about 5,000 people in Buffalo who claim they were at that show.
At the
At your show.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
I've heard it over and over again.
Yeah. I remember you were a lying son of a gun there, buddy. All right, I'm going to jump to the 1990s. Another great concert that my wife was at before we knew each other. We were both there. In 1994 was a Billy Joel, Elton John when they joined forces together. Great concert, 3.5 hours. The two of them traded songs with each other. They both did little mini solo concerts, and then they came back and they were doing Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis songs. And they end the night with Candle in the Wind, sing along, and then a Piano Man sing along. And I remember Billy Joel coming out at the beginning. This was right during the OJ trial was going on, and he said, "I'm BJ, that's EJ, and we're here to make you forget about OJ." Just a great concert. And I'll finish the concerts up with a recent one. Garth Brooks was in town in like 2023, I believe, and I saw an interview with him when he was leaving, and I don't know if this was the same like Ted Nugent thing where he says this in every town, but he said Thunder Rolls was not like a sing-along song, but everyone in the stadium sang along, and he said it was the best version of Thunder Rolls that they ever did. And it was a concert I didn't. I would have liked it because I'm a fan of Garth Brooks. I don't like a lot of country, but I always liked what Garth Brooks brought to the table. I wish I was at that concert. Anyway, before we get back to football, another great thing about the stadium that I have a special memory of. I worked for a company called Admar Supply for a long time, and Admar was a construction company where we delivered a lot of equipment to construction sites. And in fact, I remember Jim Kelly meeting me one time. He was working on his house, and he didn't want us to go to his house. So I had to meet him on the 400, right, and pull over to the side of the road and take his equipment off my trailer and put it on his trailer. And I remember him giving me $100, saying thanks. Nice. For it, because he didn't want us to go to his house. I guess he didn't want people to know where he lived, or right. I don't know what the deal was, but I remember having to meet him on the 400 when I worked for Admar, and him give me a tip. I asked him, "Hey, do you remember me? I used to be your caddy." He's like, "No." So thanks, Jimbo. Anyway, but during that time, and Admar still is the supplier for the Buffalo Bills of the generators and the fans. And one of my favorite things of working for them was I would always on the Fridays before the game, deliver all the generators, all the light towers, and all the fans to the stadium. And I got to drive down the tunnel and place the fans were by the benches and stuff. And I would walk around that stadium, and I remember standing on the visitor side on the sideline and go, wow, Don Shula stood here, or Joe Namath was here, or all these great Terry Bradshaw, all the great names from the past came to me. Then I'd go over to the Bill side, and this is where Jim Kelly sits, and it was just an awesome experience. And watching the games, whenever they would show the sidelines and the team huddled up by the heaters or going by the fans when it was too hot, I'd say, I delivered those. That was me. And it was a great experience. And while I was delivering there, another experience I want to talk about, a great moment and great event at the stadium, was in 2008, January, New Year's Day 2008, the original Winter Classic for the NHL, where the Sabres played the Pittsburgh Penguins. I remember delivering the equipment to the stadium and watching it go from a football field to a hockey rink. And I would sit there and just watch from the tunnel as they were, building and turning it into a rink. And it was just amazing to watch. And the game was just amazing to see on TV, the way it looked. Unfortunately, the Sabres lost the game.
And they lost, fittingly, I guess they're going to lose to, at the time, the best player in the league, Sidney Crosby scored the game-winning goal. But, people, had gotten used to those Winter Classics. That was the first one. And people had never seen anything like that before. Buffalo was the perfect choice to host the first one.
Over 70,000 people.
It looked like a snow globe was the national term, and it was a really special event. I remember watching it on television. Tickets were very, very difficult to come by for that game.
Yeah,
one of the most difficult tickets I think to get in the history of that stadium.
I remember just watching it on TV afterwards, but I just enjoyed seeing them build it, and then going back after the game and picking up all the equipment and seeing them knocking it down. It was really cool. Cool thing to experience, and like you said, it did. It really put the stadium on a national spotlight. And I remember at the time, even like Colin Cowherd, who doesn't follow NHL or anything, even said, "Wow, I don't like hockey, but that looked cool."
Yeah,
and it was a great event at our beloved stadium. So, Tommy, now we're going to move on to the 1990s and the Buffalo Bills and the Super Bowl years. Give me your first recollection of, let's go to the 1990 season.
Well, I think that people knew at that time we had something good. And as the season went on, the Bills really became a juggernaut. The K-gun was unstoppable. The tandem of Kelly and Smith were just racking up points and yards, really at an unprecedented rate. On the other side of the ball, you had Bruce Smith, who was an absolute terror. You had Biscuit, who we mentioned. You had Shane Conlon. You had Darryl Taylor. And that team...
Nate Odoms.
You're right. And that team was just an absolute powerhouse. And I think as the season went on, people started to look at this team and said, this is the team that's going to get it done.
Yeah, well, the K-Gun started, if I remember correctly, in the playoff loss to Cleveland in the '89 playoffs, where that's where the K-Gun originated. And I remember again being with my dad at the home opener in 1990 against the Colts, and Jeff George was the Colts rookie quarterback that everyone was talking about. And I remember Biscuit and Bruce meeting him and just destroying him.
I remember that.
And the K-Gun, no huddle. It was just an amazing thing. Nobody could stop it. But my favorite memories of that year were back-to-back weeks. First against the Denver Broncos, where the Broncos are killing us, and they're just dominating the game. And they go for a field goal, and it gets blocked, and Cornelius Bennett runs it all the way back. We end up scoring 3 touchdowns in something like 21 seconds or something. The next play, the Broncos get the ball, and it's intercepted. Oh, my God, what's his name? I can't think. Number 47, Smith. Oh, God, he was Leonard Smith. Leonard Smith intercepts and takes it back for a pick six touchdown. And the next play, the next series for the Broncos, they fumble the kickoff and they're on like the 2-yard line, and they fumble the snap, and Cornelius Bennett recovers, and Kenneth Davis walks into the to the end zone, and like that, we're up by multiple scores and win the game. They actually had to quiet the fans down, or else they were going to give the Bills a penalty because it was such pandemonium, as Van Miller would say, fandemonium. Yeah. The next week, we play the Raiders, and they're beating us. Same thing. Block a punt, and Steve Tasker blocks the punt, and J.D. Williams recovers it and goes for a touchdown, and I can still hear the announcer on TV going, "They did it again! They did it again!" And they just come back again against the Raiders, and you just had that feeling watching those two games back to back, like they were destined for greatness. And I remember going in that season to Cleveland after we lost to them in the playoffs and just annihilating them. So something like 42-0 or something like that. And it was just, Marv just had control of that team. And that's, of course, where the great saying that we all say to this day is, where else would you rather be than right here, right now? Just a great feeling. The playoffs that year, again, one of my all-time favorite games was the AFC divisional round against the Miami Dolphins in the snow. Still one of my favorite games to go back and watch. It's on YouTube, where it was just a gunfight between Kelly and Marino. Those battles between Kelly and Marino in the late 80s up into the mid-90s were just historic. And, we hate the Dolphins because of what they did to us in the 70s, where we lost every game. That was another game that I forgot to mention in the 80s, the opener in 1980 season, where we finally beat the Dolphins, and they actually knocked the field goals down. Yeah. And they brought them up to Ralph Wilson was. I remember that. So the Dolphins were this hated team. Yeah, that 1980 opener was historic for any Bills fan of that age. Can remember knocking down the goalpost. I also remember in '88 when we beat the Jets 9-6 to win the AFC division for the first time, and they also knocked down the goalpost.
I think the statute of limitations has passed. Well, I'll admit this. I was on the field
for '88,
and I was had the goalpost on my shoulder as we were marching it around the field. We were in the end zone. The Jets, if you remember, missed a field goal. Yep. That gave the Bills victory. Everyone poured over the wall, and we celebrated on the field. And I was part of the. I didn't tear the goalpost down.
You carried it.
I carried it as we marched around the field. It was a great memory.
It was a great memory, and that's again where I said that game was like 9-6.
Right.
So again, when I mentioned about Norwood, he was like almost one of the MVPs of that season.
And that's where, as you mentioned, the term fandemonium originated at that game.
Yeah, that was an incredible experience. But that 90 playoff game, and all these games against the Dolphins, the Bills are in Jim Kelly and those teams, and Kelly and Marino are good friends. Yeah. I just saw an interview with them a couple days ago, and they're great friends. They do their golf tournaments with each other and everything. Kelly kept him out of the Super Bowl, because they just couldn't get past the Bills. Yeah. But that snow game was just a fantastic memory. And then again, we got to talk 51-3.
Yeah, that's my personal favorite of all the games I was at the stadium, because it was just so celebratory. The Bills were going to the Super Bowl, and it was a blowout of the Bo Jackson-led Raiders. The Bills came out and completely blew them off the field. The game was over by the second quarter, and it was just a time of great celebration in the stands. It seemed like an impossible dream since 1973 that the Bills would actually go to the Super Bowl.
It was unbelievable.
And they were headed there. And again, that was a really euphoric event. And of all my great memories at Bills games over the years, that's my favorite.
I remember my dad crying, and that's what this team means to us. When I talk about family.
And at the end of that game, I remember walking out of the stadium and thinking, there is no way a Giants team, who we had just beaten soundly 2 weeks previous, were going to have a chance in the Super Bowl.
Especially because they had a backup.
Right, and we were, ecstatic, euphoric, and just absolutely convinced that we were walking out of the stadium having just seen the next Super Bowl champion team.
If I have any criticism on Marv Levy, it's those Super Bowls that I feel we were outcoached.
The first one was it was time management was horrible on the last drive.
Bill Parcells, even just the defense not being, of course everyone knows the wide right.
Yeah.
But every player to a man on that team said, if Darryl Talley remembers, if I make this tackle, I remember there was a 3rd and long in that Super Bowl, and they couldn't wrap the guy up, and they get the first down, and the longest drive at the time, at least, it was in Super Bowl history, where the Giants just took over the game, and that was their best defense, was keeping our offense off the field.
Right.
And Thurman still almost won MVP.
138 yards
in that game, and that kick, 47 yards. But the amazing thing about the Buffalo Bills and the Mafia was the day after, when they meet downtown to celebrate the team, and they all call out chanting Scott Norwood's name. And
I came from work, went directly downtown. I was there, and they were chanting for Norwood. The other players were speaking. And he was crying. It was
Marv was crying.
It was one of the emotionally most powerful events related to sports I've ever been a part of or ever saw. It really displayed, the Bills' character, the city's character.
The city's character. I think if you want anything about Buffalo, to know about the character of Buffalo, that's probably the greatest. Other than the way maybe they handled the blizzard of '77. That's probably the greatest example of the character.
And I remember there was a national, back in the days you had national correspondence, and it put out a story that was printed in newspapers around the country. Buffalo displays a heart, a frozen city displays a heart of warmth. It's something along those lines, and it really captured that moment in that event. And I think that Scott Norwood, given he's going to be haunted by that play the rest of his life.
He still is. You see him. Did you ever watch the documentary "The Four Falls of Buffalo"?
Yeah.
And you can see it still to this day shakes.
But I'm sure that somewhat mitigated by his memory of how the city reacted afterwards at that celebratory event.
Well, I would not give up. We go on to lose 4 straight Super Bowls. They're the only team to go to 4 straight Super Bowls. I wouldn't change a thing about those 4 years. If someone comes up and said, you know what, they only went to that one Super Bowl and they beat the Giants, but then they broke up as a team and went downhill after it, I would say no. I wouldn't trade those years for anything. Some of the most greatest memories, again, with my dad, with my family, were going to those games. I remember a game in '90 against Philadelphia Eagles where we just went off on like 24 points in the first quarter. James Lofton had an amazing game. And it was just so many memories. You think of 1991 and Thurman winning the MVP, gaining 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving, and some of the great games in '91, blowing out Pittsburgh. I remember a game where like Don Beebe scored 4 touchdowns.
Yep.
I thought they were better. I thought because they were killing now, whereas they were just getting by in 1990 season and beating teams. Sometime as I mentioned with Denver and the Raiders, by having to come back, Buffalo was just blowing out teams in '91, and I thought they were a better team than they were in 1990. And then we ran into after beating Kansas City, Steve DeBerg led Kansas City Chief team in a divisional round. Pretty convincingly, we ran into Denver and John Elway and that defense that found a way to stop the Buffalo offense, and we just barely scraped by and win 10-7.
It was a fun game,
and it was a defensive
touchdown. It was, and I remember being in the stands for that also, and thinking, "Wow, this is the complete inverse of the year before, where we just." Couldn't be stopped, racking up 51 yards. And that was a real defensive battle, and the Bills could not get that offense going. But to be fair, neither could the Broncos.
Right.
To go from a 51-3 AFC championship to a 10-7 AFC championship. But I think the feeling was we won. So, and we moved on.
Right. And then of course, we go to the Super Bowl and just get dominated by the Redskins, which I couldn't believe. I really thought that we would have been the better team with Mark Ripken, and they have Mark Ripken, we have Jim Kelly. I thought there was I thought our receivers got mugged. I remember Andre Reed being super frustrated and throwing his helmet because they weren't calling plays. I believe that was also the game that Thurman forgot his helmet on the sideline.
We drove 20 hours to Minneapolis for that game. The night before was my birthday. Some terrible weather through Wisconsin, fighting a snowstorm, and to get there. And again, basically the game was over at halftime. It was a pretty big letdown.
Yeah. Well, then we go on to 92, and the Bills are pretty much playing like they had played the last several years. They're dominating. They're winning their division. And then Jim Kelly gets hurt in Houston and has to miss, I believe, the rest of the season. Frank Reich leads us into the playoffs against Houston, and then probably the most famous game in that stadium takes place, and we're talking about the comeback game. I was in Cleveland. We didn't go to that game. I was visiting my sister. The game was not televised in Buffalo because it wasn't a sellout, if you can believe it. And I didn't have tickets. My dad had sold the tickets or something. My dad wasn't feeling well, sold the tickets, and we went to Cleveland to my sister's house to watch the game. And everybody knows what happened. They go up 28-3 in Houston. Goes up 28-3 in the first half, and right away in the second half, Frank Reich throws a pick six. It's 35-3, and then Tommy, tell him what happened.
Yeah, and then we all sat there. I was watching the game in a pirated broadcast at a bar which is no longer there on Military Road in Kenmore, and we decided to stay just because we were all together. There was beer, and
that helps.
We were enjoying the game, and then slowly people started, who had kind of turned away from the game. You start to see a ripple in the crowd, people looking back, and that's fun. They scored another touchdown.
I remember Kenneth Davis getting a touchdown, and I made a joke. Here comes the greatest comeback of all time.
And we were kind of laughing. Well, at least they're not, at least they're making it respectable. And then before you know it, what had been a ripple among the crowd, and this bar was packed, as you can imagine, became a full-throated roar. And again, I'm not going to be like the other 2 million people that have claimed that they were at the game. Yeah. I was not at the game, but I was able to witness it, and that was an incredible experience. It was, like being in the stadium, total strangers jumping into each other's arms. It was unbelievable to see. It was something that I think that for people who were able to remember it, it's as you mentioned, probably the most famous game in the history.
Yeah, it has to be. I wish I was at that game. But BB gets a touchdown, then Andre, and then it just all of a sudden it's 35-31. Like they could do this, and then I remember my brother-in-law's neighbor kept running in from across the street and just opening up the door, going "Ah!" and then running back to his house. It was hysterical. And I remember getting a haircut that day. My sister gave me a haircut.
It never grew back.
It never grew back because I lost it all because of that game. But just one of the most amazing game. And when Christie kicks the field goal at the end and we win, what a game. And again, a thing where you thought they go on and destroy Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. They go on to Miami and beat them in the AFC Championship game. And Jim Kelly comes back for that game. And you just thought there was a sense of destiny again. After everything that they went through, that they're back in the Super Bowl and Jim Kelly is back. And they're playing very young Dallas Cowboy team with unproven Troy Aikman and unproven Emmitt Smith and Mike Irvin. And you're thinking, we're experienced, we got all this. And they just blew us to bits.
And I was at that game also. Flew out to Pasadena for that Super Bowl. And that is, I can unequivocally say, the most miserable sport event experience I've ever had.
I remember Jimmy Johnson coming off the field at halftime, and the announcer asked him, well, this is the team that came back against Houston. What are your feelings about that? And he just looked at the camera and said, we ain't Houston.
And it was a very difficult experience to sit through that game. And in fact, it was so miserable and so disheartening that at the halftime, Michael Jackson was the halftime act, and we chose rather to drown our sorrows out in the concourse and sit through Michael Jackson.
You didn't sit through the Thriller?
No, I didn't.
Well, We'll move on to '93 again. Let's get over that Super Bowl. '93 again. The team revenges that loss in the Super Bowl by beating Dallas early on in the season. In fact, that '93 season they beat the Giants, they beat the Redskins, and they beat the Cowboys.
Yep.
All the teams that beat them in the Super Bowl. And again, they go to a 13-3 season and have a great season. And it's looking like, again, this is going to be their year. They play Kansas City in the AFC Championship with Joe Montana, and Bruce Smith and that defense just beat him to a pulp. Thurman Thomas goes off and has maybe one of his greatest games as a Buffalo Bill, and they're off to their 4th Super Bowl. By this time, the country has turned on us, and the Bills are putting their 4 fingers up and saying, we're back, and stuff like that. Deal with it, America. And they're up 13-6 at halftime at the Super Bowl again against the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm thinking this is going to be something different. They've got it going. I remember Thurman fumbling and going like this, that's on me. Yeah. And they take the lead into halftime, 13-6, feeling great. Come out in the second half, Thurman fumbles. Yeah. And then it just seemed like maybe all the pressure that was on them because they had been to 4 Super Bowls, or just the mental breakdown of a team that, oh my God, we're going to blow it again, and the game was over on that fumble.
And I was, again, at that game also. I have to say Atlanta did a great job of hosting the Super Bowl. The 4 Super Bowls I went to, that was the most fun in terms of what the city was able to produce. But anyhow, sitting in the crowd at the half, we had the lead. We were confident that this is the year. Stevie Wonder was sitting not far from me and enjoying the game in his own way. And we were convinced that this is the year. And I can say, from sitting there behind the Bills bench, not too far away, great seats, when Thurman fumbled that ball, the collective energy of that team just was gone. And amazingly it is to say, everybody in that stands who was a Bills fan knew they were going to lose that game.
Yeah. I remember my dad crying again. My dad had cancer at that point. He had just found out he'd been having seizures, and we took him to the hospital, and the doctor, and he did tests on him, and he found out he had cancer. And right before that, so the Bills have been so important to our family and to my dad, and he had passed that on to me, which I passed on to my kids. And that's the thing about the Buffalo Bills, that the family. And I remember him crying and saying, I'm never going to see it. I'm never going to see them win a Super Bowl. And it broke his heart. It was just devastating to witness. As bad as I felt worse for him.
Yeah.
And then, as we go on, the final seasons with Kelly, 96, 95 happens, they get into the playoffs, they beat Miami, and they lose to Pittsburgh in the divisional round. They get back to the playoffs in 96. Kelly has a really bad year in 96. Yeah. He was struggling. And he gets into the playoffs against Jacksonville, who we're going to be playing this week. And Mark Brunell led Jacksonville Jaguars. And in true fitting form, the last game of Jim Kelly, he has to get carried off the field because he got knocked out. And the Bills lose. And that was kind of the end of that dynasty.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was at that game, and that was maybe the most disheartening loss I've ever been a part of, because when Kelly was carted off, people understood that this is the good times are coming to an end. I really think the crowd was in a very ugly mood. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
And it was not a pleasant game to be at. Jacksonville was only, I believe, in their second year.
Right, they came in 95.
People were confident we'd be able to beat these upstarts, and Kelly goes off, and I think at that point people said, "That's it. We're never going to see, our man in a uniform again, and this is probably the end of what our dynasty," and it was.
And again, the way he gets carried off the field like a warrior, and that's what he was. And we never saw until Josh.
Yeah,
we never saw a quarterback. The closest we came to, I would say, to anything the toughness of Jim Kelly was Joe Ferguson playing with like a broken leg against the Chargers in the playoffs in the early '80s. It was just an amazing career and an amazing event. And again, we keep talking about the best quarterback in Bills history. And we all do say Josh and that now. It's like, it's hands down is Josh. He's great. He's the better athlete.
Right.
For sure. But until he gets us to 4 Super Bowls, the only one that's done it is Jimbo. And I can, again, not to keep bringing up my dad, he survived his cancer long enough to see Jimbo retire. And Jimbo retires at the beginning of 97. My dad died a couple months later. But we're sitting there on the couch watching the speech, and when Kelly retired, in the clubhouse, he was at the Bill Stadium, and we're watching, and everyone's crying, and Jim's talking about his wife is pregnant, which would have been his son,
right.
Hunter, who everybody knows that was probably the change in Kelly.
Yep.
Where he became the man that he became, and he loses his son after all this battle. And then he ends up with cancer himself, and the bottom line. This is a guy that didn't want to be here, that lives here to this day. That was kind of a jerk when he comes, had that attitude, didn't want to be here, falls in love with the city, plays his heart and soul out for the city to the point where they have to carry him off the field at the end. And then he never leaves.
I don't think there's anyone you could say is more beloved in the in the Western community than Jim Kelly. That's along with Marv Levy, and that's a real testament to the change, like you said, the change that took place in him while he was here. And he was humbled by what happened to him and his family. He became a great spokesman for faith. And
right.
He really was not ashamed to talk about him and his wife Jill's reliance on God to get them through the difficult times that they've had. And again, he's just an icon, probably unmatched in West New York.
It was fantastic to see him at the game, and he gave a great speech at halftime yesterday. But yeah, great, and seeing my dad cry. Those guys, when he was retiring, those guys felt like family. Yeah. That team felt like a family to us. We didn't know them personally, but we felt we did. We shared their highest moments and their lowest moments, and that's the impact. I don't think any other city has. I can darn sure show you I remember knowing times when I lived in California, the fans of the Rams and that don't feel the same way about that team right. as we feel about our Bills.
In that time it was a different time, as you mentioned. I remember those late '80s, early '90s, going down to the Sunset Bay Beach Club, Calico Jacks down on the waterfront down there in Angola, and we going in, and Bruce Smith was dancing and partying in the crowd with the people in the bar. Yeah. People could go into the Big Tree Lounge during the Super Bowl years and see Darryl Talley sitting there and have beer and wings with them.
Right.
You don't see that anymore. The game has changed. I get it. The society's changed.
Right.
But there was a time when I remember high-fiving Bruce Smith, dancing in just, it was a real team of the people that we just, sports doesn't allow us to see that.
And those guys, those players are still like that. My wife met Steve Tasker and Thurman Thomas. Our school buddy Kevin Steinig, if you watch this video today or anytime, messages me last night and said he's tailgating when who else but Steve Tasker walks into their tent and starts having beer with them.
Yeah.
And stuff, and tailgates with them. And I said, that's awesome. And Kevin wrote back, he's the salt of the earth.
Yeah.
And that was just that team. And he's another guy, Steve Tasker, who his last play as a Buffalo Bill, he gets ejected for fighting.
I remember that.
And stuff, just a tough little guy, and he needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Warrior.
Yeah. And then, in 98, 99, Flutie comes to the team, and we still have Thurman and Andre and Bruce. And so the last pieces of that dynasty are give it one last shot, and Flutie does his best, and I think Flutie got screwed by by Ralph Wilson in the 2000 season when in the 99 season we go to the playoffs in 98 and lose to Miami, and get back there after another good season by Flutie in 99. Some great games. 98 season, I remember the naked boot against Jacksonville. Yep. Just one of the most famous plays in that stadium as well. 99, we get to the playoffs and lose to the Tennessee Titans. with the throwback that everyone knows we don't want to talk about that play. But the true story of that game was that they benched Flutie for Rob Johnson simply because they paid Johnson more money.
Yeah.
And Ralph didn't want to pay that guy to sit on the bench. And what would have happened if Flutie would have been in that game? I think it doesn't come down to that play. And then the jinx happens after that, the curse, where we go through the drought, and Johnson is gone after 2021, and Drew Bledsoe is going to be the savior of the team. And my immediate thought, first, maybe the darkest period in that Bills team in a modern era, they changed their uniform to that horrible that dark blue on blue, whatever that was, and that ugly away uniform that they had. Look horrible because they're trying to look like, I think, the Denver Broncos, the same color pattern. And Drew Bledsoe is supposed to be our new hero. And my first thought was, if he was that good, the Patriots never would have allowed him to go in their division.
That first game against the Patriots, he won. It was a big win against the Patriots to start out the season, and people, well, here we are. We got our new quarterback, and
No, they didn't do well. And in fact, I think his best season was his last, 2004, where we went 9-7, and they had a chance in the final game to get to the playoffs, and it's 4th down, and they're going for it against Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's resting their starting quarterback and everything.
Was already in the playoffs. They're
in the playoffs, so they're resting their guys. All we need to do is score this touchdown, but it's 4th down, and he throws the ball out of bounds. He throws the ball away. I'm like, what did... He threw the ball away. And it was the last time he played for us. Yeah. And then we go through the string of different quarterbacks on the team. We go through J.P. Lossman, who always reminded me of Adam Sandler from Waterboy when he had his helmet on. Talking about Star Wars in his interviews. We go through
Tyrod Taylor.
Before Tyrod Taylor, Trent Edwards. Who's I'm sure a wonderful person. Everyone said he was just the nicest guy. I remember making deliveries to the stadium and stuff, and when I would go into security, be like, oh, Trent is just the nicest guy. And at one point, I can point to his falling. Dick Duran was our coach, and he was a very passive, soft-spoken man. And we were, I believe, 4-0 and starting great, and we played Cardinals, and he got hit and knocked out of the game, Trent Edwards, and he was never the same afterwards. Yeah. So just, oh my goodness. I can't even remember all the quarterbacks.
No, and then again, we had a brief flash of hope with Fitzpatrick.
But you knew deep down in your heart.
Even though they went 5-0 to start the season, with Fitz magic behind the wheel, it quickly, the wheels came off.
No, I remember always getting into this with my son. And my son is like a realist in that, and he was, if anything, my son is over negative about the team, because he's so afraid to give his heart and get broken again and again. And I'm like, I don't know, Fitz is doing good. And even though your eye test says he's not up to par with all these, he's good, he's exciting, he's fun, he's a smart guy, he's a good guy, he just wasn't up to par with these other quarterbacks, and you just knew it, but you didn't want to admit it because you're a fan.
That's it, exactly.
And my son would be like, no, Dad, there isn't a chance that we're going to go. And my son was right. Yeah. But he did have, we had some, I remember the big comeback game against New England where we were down 21-0, and he led us back in that game. So there were some fun moments in the game. I can think of some names like TKO Spikes.
Was that Spikes?
Yeah, guys like that.
A lot of hype.
So and we had Lynch. Was it Marshawn Lynch was on our team for a short period? So we had a couple good players. But that was the thing, is I was saying with Trent Edwards, he kind of took on the mannerisms of Dick Duran, who recently passed also, and it was, again, not the greatest coach, but a very good man. We just go through this stretch where. The Bills are threatening to leave. There was always that threat that they're going to move to Toronto, they're going to move to Los Angeles before The Rams went back there. There was all these threats that we're going to lose the team. They went to Toronto for a couple games. And then Ralph passes away. Ralph Wilson passes away. And Terry Pagula buys the team. And to be honest with you, I thought he's going to turn around the Sabres before he turns around the Bills because he also owned the Sabres, and he was more of a hockey guy.
He was.
But I think the best thing Pagula did was take his hands off of it, get a good GM, and they hire Sean McDermott. And Sean McDermott's first year with Tyrod still at quarterback, we break the drought. And we lose a stinker of a playoff game. What was it, 10-3?
Yeah.
To the Jacksonville team. Which I think, Sean McDermott should do some of this revenge this week.
Yeah.
His first playoff game was the loss to Jacksonville. So let's revenge that. And then the next year, everything turns around, and we draft Josh Allen. And I was sitting at Slick Willie's on Niagara Falls Boulevard with my wife. We lived right around the corner at the time, and we were watching the draft, and I cried. When we got Josh Allen, I thought, and not to be morbid, but, we're getting up there in age, and I thought, this could be my last quarterback that I could see maybe his entire career, and I just thought to myself, this could be magic here. And, he showed glimpses in his rookie year, and in 2019, we get to the playoffs again and lose to Houston. And
He didn't play great, especially in the fourth quarter of that game.
No, he didn't. You could see he was still learning, and then from 2020 on, the memories that have been made in that stadium, whether during the COVID years, where it was an empty stadium, and they gave us something to cheer for during those hard times. Just some great games.
Just so many great games, so many great memories. You mentioned that first season. I think what really endeared Josh to Buffalo fans was that game against the Vikings when he does the leap over. I think at that point people said, we're going to have something special here. And when they drafted him, full disclosure, I didn't think it was a good pick. I thought there was better quarterbacks. My main concern was coming out of Wyoming. He simply hadn't faced a lot of good talent. Wyoming doesn't exactly play, the schedule, and I felt that he hadn't been tested enough to succeed. And happily, I will admit I was proven wrong.
I just thought he was a big guy with this huge arm, and he was fast and he was tough, and I thought that this could be a guy given the tools. I believed in McDermott. I believed if they could go to the playoffs with Tyrod. That now with this young guy, and I didn't that rookie year, I kind of gave him that year off, basically saying, no, I don't expect him going to Super Bowl or playoffs or whatever this year. He's got to learn, he's got to grow, for that simple reason that he came from a small college and he has to learn the NFL. I think the big come out game for Josh Allen was in 2019 Thanksgiving against the Dallas Cowboys.
Absolutely.
I can vividly just close my eyes and remember a fourth down play where he snuck and got the first down and just jumped up and celebrated.
That was a good Cowboys team. If you remember, nobody gave the Bills a chance to win that game.
Right.
And that was, I think we could look back at that game as the turning point.
That was the star making.
That we see with him to this point.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, there's so many great memories. Young kids now, you see the 17 jerseys. My daughters, they're in middle school and high school, and Josh he's the talk. He's the rock star, and he's a guy who, he's brought us some incredible moments over the last few years.
It's hard to believe it's been 8 seasons
and
already.
His his athleticism, his will to win, he's really endeared himself as, in my opinion, as the best player the Bills have ever had. I know you could talk Bruce Smith, and that's a debatable issue.
You could talk Bruce Smith, Andre Thurman Thomas,
right.
Jim Kelly. You could talk O.J. Simpson.
Right.
You can talk Cookie Gilchrist and Jack Kemp. For guys that we really didn't see play.
It's all debatable, but
from
what I've seen, the years that I've been watching the Bills since 1970, 71, he's at least, I'd say, the most exciting player
He
Let's
just
put it
has
that
to
way.
get into
the
that Super
Bills
Bowl.
have better. And unfortunately, we don't have to rehash this. And we all know the Chiefs have,
Yeah.
it is what
It almost reminds me going back to when we were talking about Bob McAdoo and the Buffalo Braves, where you have Bob McAdoo was probably the best player in the league, and they couldn't get past the Boston Celtics. Now you have Josh Allen, possibly the best player in the NFL, and he had a hard time. He couldn't get past Kansas City. Now this year,
no Kansas City.
there's no Kansas City. There's no Baltimore. They are the most experienced team, and they are actually favored in the Jacksonville game.
Yeah.
Going on the road. You're talking to your friend Paul Boudreau, our friend, says he gives them no chance of winning 3 games in a row and getting to the Super Bowl. I disagree with you, Paulie, if you watch this video. I think that they are a team that built to do this. This is a team that plays their best, I think, when their back is against the wall, and their back is against the wall now. They got rested yesterday. They were able, their best players sat down. We have an injury to our kicker that really concerns me. Harrison got hurt yesterday. That concerns me. But I just feel I have confidence in our coaching. I have confidence in Josh being the game maker. I have confidence in Cook finding a way. They said that he couldn't run against Houston. He did. I think Cook did go on to win the rushing title this year, and he didn't even play yesterday. He rushed the ball twice. So I feel that they have a chance. And with this stadium closing, it would be so fitting if we finally get our Super Bowl ring this year, closing out that stadium. It was just, again, these last 8 years, these last 5 years that I've had season tickets again, have been some of the greatest experiences I've had. And I'm going to give you a shot right now to give your final takes on that stadium and what it meant to you.
I think that, so many great memories wrapped up in that stadium. I go back to, incredible games. So many we didn't even have the time to mention here.
Yeah.
There was a great...
And this is a long video, too.
The year after they beat the Redskins, the Redskins came back here for a great snow-filled Monday night game that the Bills defeated them.
Yeah.
And it just goes on and on. The concerts, the great experiences, tailgating in that stadium or in those parking lots, being around some best friends I've ever had, some of who, let's face it, are no longer with us.
Right.
And their memories are tied up with us in that stadium. Just the camaraderie. They did nothing like total strangers jumping into each other's arms, and
it's amazing.
It was a part of our life that I think we're lucky to have.
It happened last night. I'm walking out of the stadium, or I'm waiting. Diana had to use the ladies' room before we left, and they had fireworks going off, and they're playing "What a Wonderful World," and I'm waiting for her in there. There's a long line. I go back into the tunnel and I give one last look at the field, and the fireworks going off, and I look over at section 135 where me and my dad and our family would sit. I'm looking at it for the last time, and as you said, my grandfather, people that are gone, my grandfather that sat in those chairs, my sister who's passed on, my cousins, Johnny and Danny, who have passed on, that I spent some great moments in that stadium with. I think of being watching that Elton concert, that first concert that changed my life, that said I need to have a life in music, happened in that stadium. Thinking that my wife Diana was at her very first concert in 1994 in that stadium, and I was there too. We just didn't know each other yet. Just so many things that connect my life, my family's life, and I say that, but you can go into any household in Western New York, and every other family has the same stories.
One of the amazing things about humans is we do form emotional connections with places, with buildings, with places, and people have emotional connections to that stadium, and I think that people who experience incredible highs and even lows there
right.
are going to carry them with them for the rest of their life. And look, I've seen the new stadium. I've been outside of it. It looks fantastic, and new memories will be built there.
Right.
But
especially our generation,
for older people like ourselves, there's going to be that connection.
It'll never.
To that
We won't
place.
be there in 52 years.
Right.
to see, if another stadium is built and that. But we were here for these 52 years.
Right. And I felt the same way when they closed the yard.
That's Buffalo, man. These things, this is a blue collar town. We have rough winters. We're the butt of so many jokes. We live and die by our sports teams, especially our Buffalo Bills. When they do bad, we feel bad, but we still fill that stadium every year. When they do good, there's nothing like a Monday going to work or coming to do these shows after a victory by the Bills. It just makes your whole week. It's just an amazing experience, and it just brings families together. And as corny as this might sound, when I said like all these people, they're in a different house, shares the same memories that we share and our family shared. When What a Wonderful World is playing, I walk out of the tunnel and I'm singing the song, waiting for Diana to come out the ladies' room, and there's this guy walking past me. He's singing the song, and our eyes meet, and we hug each other.
Yeah.
I don't know who this guy is.
Yeah.
And he just tears in my eyes, tears in his eyes, knowing that we're in that building for the last time. And I've said it many times, I always felt my family with me every time I went into that stadium. And you're right, as fun as the new stadium's going to be, we won't have those same memories. But because of where we live, generations, our kids and their kids will have those memories in that stadium.
It's like to say it's just a building, but it isn't. Just like it's just a game, but it's not.
Yeah. It's our home, and it's a reflection of ourselves, and it brings out the best in us, and sometimes it brings out the worst in us. There's always going to be knuckleheads in the world, but for the most part,
I never got thrown out. Full disclosure, so
it does bring out when you have moments like that, like I had with that gentleman yesterday, and hundreds of others. Saying goodbye to the guys that I sat with. The kid that I said was born in 1992 sits behind me, had tears in his eyes when we're walking. And I said to him, I go, these are the best seats I ever had in my life, and it's because of you guys. And then the guy's got tears rolling. He's a big guy. You saw him last year. Yeah. He was on TV with the shirt off, partying. Tears in his eyes. It means so much, folks. It means so much. So let's finish it off, Tommy. Any last thoughts before we go?
Well, we move onward and upward. Life is full of change, and we're starting it this Sunday. The first game where the Bills are not going to be going back to. Looking forward to the next game back at the stadium.
Right.
And it's going to be a difficult game. I'm not going to.
What are your take? Let's get our prediction for it.
Okay. I hate to say it, and he's going to hate me for it.
I won't hate you.
I don't see the Bills going to Jacksonville winning the game. I just don't. I'm sorry.
I'm going to say that we're going to win 24-21.
I hope you're right. I try to be honest as I can.
Yeah, I understand it totally.
Jacksonville is not a team that we've matched up too well over the years, especially
we killed them last year.
When we lost them in London. You and I watched the game together.
That was the London game, but last year we killed them.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just don't have a lot of faith in this defense. I hate to.
I think the defense has been playing much better. Look at what they did with the Eagles.
Yeah.
What they did, and I think that we have the better quarterback. And I also think people are looking at the record and saying, oh, they're putting up these points. They're also going from a last place team and had a very easy schedule this year and played teams that where we're people play us and we're their Super Bowl. Because we've been where we've been for the last 5 years.
I hope you.
And I just feel with the experience, I think we have the best running back in the league. We have the best quarterback in the league. I'm very optimistic about Cooks finally being on the same page with Josh, and they also rested Cooks yesterday. Mm-hmm. So, and the defense has shown great signs of improvement the second half of the year. They've been really a solid unit, and I think they're walking into, other than the kicker, and we'll see what happens with Hairston, they're walking in healthy. They rested Boza. People thought he was never going to make it for the year. He's going to be in there. I'm optimistic. They might get 24 points, but they might have to go for 2-point conversions and only score 3 touchdowns to get those 24 points.
Yeah.
You know, and the 2-point conversions or something. I don't know what they're going to do with kickers. We'll find out. But I'm going with my Bills, and I don't hate you for betting against you. I look forward to doing the post game next week, and kind of laughing at you a little bit.
I hope you are.
Thanks for watching. I know this is a really long video, but just my last take on it. That stadium meant the world to me. Some of the greatest moments in my life, outside of my children being born, right. and obviously marrying my wife. Some great experiences I had, the bonding I had with my dad, the experience I had with my family and friends through the year at that stadium are just priceless to me, and it's going to be different for us, but again, life is about moving forward, and the next generation of Bills fans are going to love that stadium across the street that we're going to be going into next year as much as I love this stadium. So thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks, Tom, for doing this.
It was a lot of fun.
I hope you stick around to the end of this video. I know it's a long one. Next week will be much shorter, but Buffalo Bills Stadium, Ralph Wilson Stadium, the Ralph, Rich Stadium, Highmark Stadium. Thanks for the memories, and
go Bills.